environment to maximize the opportunities in the African Continental Free Trade Area AfCFTA. This position was put forward by promoters of Made in Nigeria goods at the opening of the 16th Abuja International Trade Fair. Musa Abubakar reports.
With focus on showcasing made in Nigerian goods and huge trade potentials, the Abuja International Trade Fair is the next port of call for these businesses from within and outside the Federal Capital Territory. This year's edition focused on taking advantage of the African Continental Free Trade Area, and the Abuja Chamber of Commerce and partners are particular about capacitating Nigerian businesses to be well positioned.
Private sector must be ready to capitalize on the readiness of government to deploy all state apparatus in support of Nigeria's participation in the Africa trade.
The agreement has entered into effect or into force on 1st of January this year, 2021. But we are still putting in place certain measures and to make sure that we implement.
AfCFTA has the potential to increase employment opportunities, reduce poverty, and broaden economic inclusion, which will lead to inclusive economic growth.
With more local businesses ready to take the continental stage, the future of the Single Market Initiative looks bright, starting with this exhibition.
Figures obtained from the National Bureau of Statistics (NBS) indicate that the value of manufactured goods imported into the country exceeded exports by 4.37 trillion naira in the second quarter of 2021. The NBS stated that the value of manufactured goods trade in the period under review stood at 4.51 trillion naira, representing 37.5% of total trade. Out of these, the export component accounted for 211.67 billion naira, while the import component was valued at 4.3 trillion naira. The products that drove up manufactured products with vessels and other floating structures for breaking up, which was exported to Cameroon in the value worth of 71.9 billion naira. It added that vessels and other floating structures for breaking up were also exported to Spain and Equatorial Guinea in values worth 18.34 billion naira and 6.62 billion naira. The NBS report stated that other products under this group were aluminium alloys on rod exported to Japan in the value worth of 10.85 billion naira and China 3.63 billion naira. Now, for most in the export business, the journey and stressful procedures at the nation's ports is a nightmare they dread. These concerns are now being addressed by the federal government through the Domestic Export Warehouse Program spread across the 6 geopolitical zones of the country. Diversifying the nation's economy and reducing administrative bottlenecks have been synonymous with the present administration. The African Continental Free Trade Area has thrown up an opportunity for Nigeria to reposition her export sector to take optimum advantage of the agreement. The Domestic Export Warehouse, known as DEW, primarily targets non-oil exports and is domiciled in the Nigerian Export Promotion Council, NEPC.
To take care of situations of export from the hinterland. That is to be able to boycott the protocols at the seaport that is causing congestion.
In establishing these warehouses, the NAPC is engaging facilitators from the 6 geopolitical zones.
There, the container is leaving there, MPA is willing to. So imagine the multiplier effects in terms of job creation and in terms of wealth creation. You know the number of exporters that we spring up from this area.
Export processes will be decentralized beyond Nigerian Port Authority in Lagos and on air to process export, both solid, agricultural, or whatever resources.
Policymakers say the DEW will encourage non-oil exporters to be more proactive and create jobs in line with President Muhammadu Buhari's quest to create 100 million jobs in 10 years. Oh, thank you. Okay. Yesterday, the world was put in a sort of disarray when Facebook, WhatsApp, and Instagram went off in what seemed to be a hack activity. Now, a lot of claims followed that, and all platforms got restored after 6 hours, but not without some consequences. Mark Zuckerberg alone lost $7 billion as Facebook shares dropped significantly. Now, to look into these issues and how they will be affecting us, I have joining me Olatunji Igbalajobi. He is the Director Information Security Development of Cybersecurity Experts Association of Nigeria, CISEN. You're welcome, Mr. Olatunji.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
Great. So just how did this impact our lives? 6 hours.
Well, what happened yesterday, it's also proves to the fact that there is absolutely no system that is rock solid, and it greatly affects the global economy. And this is not even Facebook economy, so to speak. Global economy. Nobody can ascertain the economic, the revenue impact of the Facebook, WhatsApp, and Instagram outage yesterday, because other corporate organization, individual who rely on this social media blogging application to carry out their business activity can testify to how much of revenue impact that had on their business. So to ascertain the economic impact, I think we can't vividly come to a conclusion that this is the economic and the revenue impact of this particular incident. So basically, I think from Facebook, record has come out that they have about $7 billion revenue impact. But global economy, we can't ascertain the revenue impact of the outage.
So, do you have any record of what this means for businesses, particularly Nigerian businesses? We have a lot of people, as you've pointed out, transacting on Instagram, on Facebook, in fact, even WhatsApp. There's WhatsApp for business. So how did it affect them? And would you say it's like a scenario of putting all your eggs in one basket?
Yeah, I mean, this is what we call unavailability of service, in security. When security is not available, and it becomes a major challenge. And for entrepreneurs who are just small, medium scale enterprise, this tells a lot who rely on social media, for their business activity. I mean, this is to tell you that the challenge of not having, you are not able to manage a critical infrastructure, which you are just leveraging on the infrastructure. You are not the owner. That takes a lot to how SME also have to think about business now. Because if this impacts the business, then how then do they want to continue business? For instance, if this continue to persist, because we can't really ascertain, the information has been going on that's around the DNS of Facebook, server returning field, the BGP, not being able to access it. That is the border gateway protocol. So entrepreneur, SME in Nigeria needs to begin to look at, there's a need for them to look at other methods of carrying out business, maybe personally having their, in their own web page where they can make it more like an e-commerce, where people can have sort of communication with their customers. A lot of people resort to Telegram yesterday, but then, what if Telegram is also down tomorrow? I mean, how much of this? So basically, it also boils down to looking at having our own microblogging as a nation that we can really rely on for business purpose in this era.
Some would say this is a sort of pointer to the fact that one man is vested with so much power, especially in the cyberspace. Do you agree with this claim?
I don't really agree because this is an internet, and we have what we call the network of networks. So, I'm quite sure, Facebook owner or Facebook as a company, they are not the only one in the business of microblogging. There are other platforms. We have Twitter. We have Telegram, we have then because they have been in the business for long year, and they have been able to develop an application that is community driven. So this are part of what have made Facebook to look like the giant in the microblogging business. So I don't believe they hold the power to what is going on in the world or to the internet. It is just leveraging, their business structure, and they have been able to come a long way and gain that presence.
We've seen some sort of a back and forth, I would call it, between the tech companies and the owners of this. The owners of these tech companies with the lawmakers now, especially in the bigger economies around the world, trying to balance power between governments and, of course, the tech companies. So with what has happened yesterday, what will be the implications of these to the global polity now and the global economy, and how do we guard against a reoccurrence of these that seems to be a sort of hostage for some people?
It still boils down to regulation, regulation of how, people can actually come up with a microblogging, so to speak, or other, innovation in technology, and how much of power do they have. But I want to believe that there are already, regulation globally, to ensure that, microblogging does not impact or infringe on people's fundamental rights as regards to data protection, data management. But in terms of the economic value, or trying to look at how to manage, the occurrence of this situation. Like I said earlier, there is no system that is rock solid, and we can't. It boils down to whoever is in the business of microblogging to ensure that they have what we call a recovery time objective. To ensure that their system is not perpetually down and cripple other business. So it boils down to managing the infrastructure well and ensuring that they put mitigation control in place to ensure that availability of service is prompt for customers and users.
Talking about data protection, and also protecting investment by those whose businesses leverage on the social media. There were also insinuations that a lot of data might have been stolen yesterday during the outage. Now, what will be the implication for countries like Nigeria and a lot of other countries that do not have the size of this technology that we are all plugging into?
I believe, for instance, in our own world, in our own country, we already have a data protection regulation, which is from the NTA, and talking about how much of data can actually, how people need to manage data. So how people can easily manage data, and then for people, it boils down to awareness. Yesterday there are some cyber criminals that are already trying to use other platforms to get users to log into a malicious page. Trying to recover your Facebook assets, kindly log into this particular link. So there are some other malicious cyber criminals who try to capitalize on the instances of Facebook outage and other platform, other Facebook platform and WhatsApp and other ones that are down, to use that as a means for social engineering. But I believe from Facebook point of view, there has not been any information that I've mentioned about data leakage. User data leakage. We have not. Based on the research that we have carried out so far, we have not come across any data exfiltration from the power outage that happened yesterday for Facebook.
Okay, I must sincerely thank you, Mr. Olatunji Igbalajobi, the Director, Information Security Development of CSAN.
Thank you.
Now let's move to Surviving COVID-19 series, and of course the package today is put together by Bosley Abel.
Surviving COVID-19 series is brought to you in partnership with the Central Bank of Nigeria.
Bolanle Emily Margaret Ligali started the yam and plantain flour business in 2020. The same year, COVID-19 struck and shut down the entire world.
We are into yam flour, which we call elubo bodo, that we use for our amala. We also have plantain flour. Here is our plantain flour. We call it elubo gede. You know, that time during the lockdown, cars were not able to move, especially interstate. It was difficult, but then, because before the lockdown, we had like a store whereby in fact, that time I just thought, okay, why don't we bag like bags? We never knew lockdown was going to come, and that was a saving grace. And when we went out of stock, it was difficult.
Going by Bolanle's excitement, they believe that this venture is highly vibrant in Nigeria may not be far from the truth. Aside the revenues generated, these particular processed foods are staples that form part of most meals in Nigeria.
We don't get our own products from here in Abuja. Sometimes we go all the way to Ibadan. We go all the way to Lagos, to Abeokuta to get some of these raw materials.
Though an uneasy path to thread with bombs that were discouraging for her business aspiration, Bolanle says starting in the heat of COVID-19 pandemic, however, exposed her better to the food markets.
Actually, because during that time, we found out that the food market, we needed to break even into the food market. People have been busy, they don't have time to do all these items themselves. So we decided, okay, let's do this part of this business whereby we can help women who are busy to actually make things easy, make cooking easy for them.
Like most entrepreneurs, finance is critical, and Bolanle is hopeful that the CBN intervention programs she has heard about can make a difference. Boss Sede Able, Business Express.
Thank you, Boss. And one of the challenges young people face globally is unemployment and underemployment. And so Olainka Ojo in this special report takes a look at government's efforts to make youth more productive for national development.
Emmanuel Ngene, before his graduation from school, began searching for white-collar jobs. And when his quest failed, he created one. He is now a manufacturer of leather shoes using locally sourced materials. He has joined the League of Entrepreneurs, providing solutions to unskilled laborers and also creating wealth.
Everybody can be an entrepreneur. It's one industry I see, or one phase of life I see that can accommodate everybody. Everybody may not do agriculture. Everybody cannot work in the civil service. Everybody cannot make shoes, but we all can be entrepreneurs.
A recent data from the National Bureau of Statistics indicates that the rate of jobless youths has increased to 33.5% from 27.1%. This means that 1 in every 3 youths between 15 and 34 years that is able and willing to work is unemployed.
And so we move the way to the commodities market. A 450-mile subsea cable which connects the UK and Norway, enabling them to share renewable energy, has started operations. In a statement, Britain's National Grid Dubbed the 1.6 billion euro North Sea Link, the world's longest subsea electricity interconnector. The North Sea Link is a joint venture with Norway's Statnett, the owner of and operator of the country's power transmission network. The idea behind the North Sea Link is for it to harness Norway's hydropower and the UK's wind energy resources, according to National Grid. When Britain's wind production is high and demand for electricity is low, the system will facilitate exports to Norway. This will in turn help to conserve water in the latter's reservoir. Oil prices climbed on Tuesday, hitting their highest level in at least 3 years, extending gains triggered during the previous session after the world's major oil producers announced they had decided to keep a cap on crude supplies. Brent crude was up by 40 cents at $81.66 a barrel, having risen 2.5% on Monday. U.S. West Texas Intermediate oil rose 30 cents to $77.92 after gaining 2.3% the previous session. The Organization of the Petroleum Exporting Countries, OPEC, and its allies, including Russia, collectively known as OPEC Plus, said on Monday it would maintain an agreement to increase oil production only gradually, ignoring calls from the United States and India to boost output as the world economy recovers, if partially from the coronavirus pandemic. Now, stocks in Nigeria opened the week in the green and are positive this morning at 0.05%. Away from home, Japan's Nikkei 225 drops more than 2%, pairing losses after entering correction territory earlier.
Open stocks are expected to open in positive territory on Tuesday, with regional investors brushing off losses on Wall Street on Monday. The UK's FTSE index is seen opening 20 points higher at 7,033, and Germany's DAX 41 points higher at 15,083. France's CAC 40 is set to trade 9 points higher at 6,491. Shares in Asia Pacific largely fell in Tuesday trade following overnight losses on Wall Street, with the tech-heavy Nasdaq Composite falling more than 2%. In Japan, the Nikkei 225 dropped 2.19%. The Nikkei had dropped more than 3% and briefly entered correction territory, while Hang Seng Index was 0.16% high, and Shanghai Composite also added 0.9%. Stock futures were muted in overnight trading on Monday, following a tech-led sell-off as investors continued to dump high-flying shares in the face of rising rates. Futures on the Dow Jones Industrial Average slipped 30 points. S&P 500 futures were little changed, while Nasdaq 100 futures traded in mildly positive territory. It's a mixed start for African markets. Namibia's overall index opened positive, posting 0.01%. South Africa's JSE Africa Top 40 started the day on a negative note, while figures are yet to come in from other markets. Boss Able, Business Express.
Thank you, Boss. And this is where we end this edition of Business Express. We value feedback, so keep the comments, observations, and suggestions coming. Be informed that all previous episodes are available on YouTube on the NTA's channel. Business Express returns Wednesday at 3 p.m. I'm Leah Katung Baba Tunde. Keep thinking and doing business, and God bless Nigeria.
This senseless killing. All we need is one Nigeria.
I think we have come to the threshold of time when we need to seek for peace.
We need peace in this country. We need peace in Nigeria.
And together, we can pull through.
No matter where you come from,
Hausa, Igbo, or Yoruba.
We cannot achieve a better Nigeria by fighting.
Let us stand together in brotherhood and solidarity and strive for peace.
And not because of their tribal or their religion or whatsoever background.
da zaman lafiya da kwanciyar hankali a cikin ƙasar Najeriya.
Let us support the government of the day to embrace peace in our nation.
Your Nigeria, our Nigeria, my Nigeria.
This message is brought to you by the Ambassador of Voice for Change Initiative, supported by the Nigerian Television Authority, NTA, and the Federal Capital Territory.
Fellow compatriots, if no single tribe or religion has defeated poverty, then no single tribe or religion can develop Nigeria. The success story of every state and capital is the contribution of every tribe and religion. Our Nigeria no be wazobia. No majorities or minorities. Every tribe and every religion still dey hustle for naira when no get tribe or religion. So, my country people, let's join this movement that says naira no get tribe and use the naira to develop our naira land. Citizens first. Citizens before state of origin. Citizens before your religion. Citizens before your ethnic belonging. For participation, call 0902 739 5555.
NTA Tuesday Live, analytical, in-depth, educative and interactive on national issues accommodating all sides of opinions.
We as a people have understood that we have to fight corruption before it fights us back.
Poverty has a financial index, so it should be fought also with a financial weapon. Give it to the Social Investments Program. It has been a very courageous battle.
Tuesday Live, every Tuesday at 10:30 p.m. Join us.
This is the network service of the NTA.
Well, hello everyone, and compliments of the season. I'm Dr. David Ajibade with the Brain and Body Foundation, and this is your health in your hands. I hope all of you are staying safe. I hope you had a wonderful Christmas, and the New Year's is meeting you well and healthy. Now, if you remember, we had Dr. Badamasi on. He is, let me quickly read out who he is. He is the Medical Director, Division of Pulmonary and Critical Care Medicine at JPS Health Network in Fort Worth, Texas. Brilliant, brilliant physician. And he, probably more than anybody else I know, is right there in the front, in the center of it all when it comes to COVID-19, because of course, COVID-19 is primarily a respiratory problem. We talked about a few things last time he was on, and I just felt there was a lot left on the table that if we didn't take advantage of while I have him, I just felt I would be very, very unhappy. So I think you would be robbed too of all the wonderful information that can still come out of this. So I asked him, and he gracefully agreed to do a few more sessions to really educate us about COVID-19 and how that impacts you, your family, the rest of the world, because this is truly a unique disease. And most doctors I speak to, I hear about, I listen to, they say there has never been a disease like this. And there probably never will be in their lifetimes. So it's important that we understand this and the implications it has for our health going forward. So Dr. Badamasi, thank you again for making this possible. We really appreciate you.
Thank you for having me.
Sure. So one of the things we talked about before we went live was that of the stress, the emotional toll that COVID-19 takes upon not just the individual himself or herself, but on the family. Can we talk about that a little bit more?
Yes, thank you so much for asking that. I think what I want your viewers to understand about this disease process is majority of the people that actually have this disease will be fine. They will only end up with a mild disease and they will be fine. They will recover. But there's a significant number of people in the prime of their lives with hypertension, diabetes, even probably well controlled or a little bit overweight that will have severe disease. And these are people's uncle, aunts, mother, husband, father, grandparents that come to us with severe disease. And the difficulty with this disease is first, when patients are sick, severely ill, or critically ill with COVID-19, family is not there. They cannot help them. They cannot hold their hands. They cannot have any last minute exchanges they will want to have, despite knowing, unfortunately, in some instances, that they are not going to make it. That is one. The second thing is the care providers themselves, doctors, nurses, respiratory therapists, pharmacists, all over the world taking care of this patient. Really see a patient walking with just a cough and maybe a little bit of shortness of breath on day one, and people still maintain their personality, they maintain relationship, they're able to talk to their care providers by day one, day two, day three. Of course, as the disease severity progresses, you start seeing patients that you've really come to know and establish a relationship with, and seeing them appropriately as human beings progressively deteriorate and pass on from this. The impact of that on the care providers, believe me, it is really, really severe. Now multiply this by having a lot of patients come in, not survive, and expire. And it really dovetails to the issue of, yes, even though a lot of people may not be affected by this, but it's still really, really important for them to participate in preventing this tragedy by following the local health recommendation, by following the guidelines of their doctors, their healthcare practitioner, government regulation, and local government regulation, wherever they may be, in regards to how best to limit the spread of this disease. A lot of people should not be in denial that this is not existing, but for the grace of God, they have been spared. And I think that recognition of grace should be understood by all. And everybody should do everything within their power to limit the spread of the disease. They may not have severe disease. They may not have critical illness from this disease. They may not even know anybody that have been through it. But a lot of families during this holiday period have empty chairs in their houses. A lot of families are grieving, some publicly, most privately. So I think, if for nothing more, out of respect for those families, people should acknowledge this is real and do their part to prevent the spread of this disease.
Absolutely. Thank you for pointing that out. And before we go into the break, I do want to ask: have you ever experienced any other kind of disease like that has this kind of emotional toll, like what you described in your practice as a pulmonologist?
No. And I've been doing this for quite a while now. I have never seen anything like this before. And it's such a devastating, terrible disease. Most people that come with severe disease into the hospital, even amongst those that survive, what people fail to realize is a substantial number of people that survive COVID still have significant lung changes and scarring that's going to really start picking up again down the line, because there will be some form of limitation in the ability to do work, to get on with their normal activities without being short of breath down the road. So that they survive, thankfully, that's a great thing. But they are not usually fully out of the woods because the lung is a terribly unforgiving organ. Once it is damaged, it heals with a scar tissue. It doesn't regenerate itself. So all of those lung damages from COVID-19, even in the survivor of this disease, still there is a consequence for that down the road. And your viewers should realize that people will start needing oxygen. People's activities will be limited from this COVID disease for a long time.
I hear you. And I understand the lungs are not the only casualty of war. We hear about mental health experts too talking about the long-term mental health effects of the disease, everything from PTSD to depression to other conditions as well. So yeah, we are dealing with, this is nothing to laugh about. Folks, we're going to take a quick break. Don't go away because we're going to be talking about the virus specifically and how it affects the lungs. So stay tuned. All right, welcome back, folks. We are here with Dr. Badamasri. Let's talk about the virus. Let's take us through this, how it affects the body.
Yes, so I'm gonna like to share some of my slides, maybe for your viewers. Perhaps that will really help them visualize exactly what I'm talking about and provide a context to everything. I will try as much as I can to speak in as much simple, non-medical terminologies as I can.
Thank you.
That should help. So I have some slides up now just to kind of like show where we are. So again, so COVID-19, as everybody knows, really belongs to the family of the coronavirus, and we've also heard of the SARS that devastated Asia and Canada and northern parts of the United States in 2002, and of course the Middle East respiratory syndrome. All of these three viruses belong to the coronavirus group of viruses. They are quite highly contagious. And the Middle East respiratory virus, everybody will know, affected Saudi Arabia and other parts of the Middle East, was spread from camels. That's the thought. Now you can see I have this timeline here for your viewers to kind of like see that we've known about the coronavirus for a long time, since around the 1930s. And most of these other viruses, coronavirus group, they basically just cause upper respiratory tract infection, like common cold, catarrh, and cough for a few days, and it goes away by themselves. The first time we knew we were getting in trouble with the coronavirus was sometimes between 2002, 2003, with the emergence of the SARS-CoV-1, right? That is the virus that caused the SARS. That led to a lot of respiratory failure, especially in Asia, Hong Kong, China. They had Taiwan. They had a lot of illnesses from this. State also experienced this between 2002 and 2003. Then 10 years later, in 2012, that's when the MERS-CoV emerged from. This is the Middle East respiratory virus, also belonging to the family of coronaviruses. Then we have the SARS-CoV-2 coming up at the later part of 2019, emerging first in Wuhan, China, as everybody know by this time. And of course, we are still in the pandemic of the coronavirus. So the reason I brought that up is to show all of those is there is still a whole lot more coronavirus from where those came from. So so as this is coming, there should be no surprise that over the last 20 years, we've had new coronaviruses every 10 years or thereabout. So there should be no surprise, even another 10 years. I honestly hope not that there's another emergence. And there's usually an animal intermediary, bats in the case of SARS-CoV that we are dealing with now. And of course, the pangolin and of course the camels in the MERS-CoV virus. Now, this is the virus which everybody knows by now. I mean, if you've seen CNN or any other media, you've seen a shape of this cartoon of the virus itself. Basically, it's an RNA virus. This is the genetic code right here. and it has some protein on the surface of it that's sticking out. And this is much more important when you talk about a vaccine of the virus against the virus. The real thing does not look nearly as beautiful as the cartoon I just showed you. You can see it in its ugly form here, and you can see those spike protein right on top there. And this is it in the human tissue. After infecting a human cell, you can see a lot of the viruses inside the cell about to rupture to release other viral particles that will go on to infect other cells. So again, from my perspective, as a pulmonologist, the way I look at the lung is basically there is an air sac here that air comes in and goes, and there is a blood vessel surrounding the air sac. And so this brings in oxygen poor blood, right? Blood that oxygen has been removed from. And the oxygen now moves from this alveolar air sac into the blood vessel, and carbon dioxide moves back out. You can see the normal lining of this sac here. It's very normal and healthy. Um, with um, with SARS-CoV and other viruses that damage the lung, they basically just damage the cell lining this sac around the lung, the fine sacs of the lungs. Right there, you can see they're all destroyed. This blood vessel that is nice and smooth is also destroyed, and you have inflammatory cells really come by and start fighting the virus. But in the process, they destroy both the lung tissue and also the blood vessels itself. So again, this is the same thing. Looking at the virus itself, it enters the host cell, which is again our human cell of the lining of our airways. It takes over the cell and it replicates itself, and it releases daughter cells that go on to infect other cells here. And ultimately, what do you have? You have a lot of damage to the blood vessel that is surrounding each of the respiratory sacs, and also you have damage to the lining of the respiratory system itself. This is the same thing I'm showing. So when you look at a CT scan of the chest, what you see basically is inflammation of the lung, as you can see right here. At about the fifth day, you can see just some sparse inflammation. The normal lung should look black, the way you are seeing this here. So you can see the inflammation here is very, very mild and sparse.
What's
But
that in the center?
here, pardon me?
What's that in the center? Is that the heart?
Yeah, that's the heart and some of the great blood vessels around the heart. And
Right.
here by day 21, the same patient, and this disease typically lasts around 3 weeks in the severe cases or more. By day 21, you can start seeing here that the inflammation is a whole lot more. Some of this initial inflammation have now turned into scar tissue. You can see a whole lot more white in the lung that normally you would expect to see with that normally you will not be seeing in the lung. So you can see the infection is not resolving at all, and the lung is now being destroyed and replaced with scar tissue. So this is another CT scan. In the early part of the COVID-19 infection of the lung, again, the inflammation is very, very minimal and is mild. And patient can still breathe normally, albeit they will know and feel that all is not well with their lungs. But as the infection progresses, it gets worse, and they have a lot of collapse of the lower part of their lung. Fluid is in their lung. Most of the lungs are destroyed. You can see the white part here.
Real quick, why is it the lower part? To me, I look at it and I see that as the back of the lungs.
Correct. So again, it's just gravity, right? Any little water in the lung will always find its level. It will go to the bottom of the lung, and that's where people are laying down more. And that's why sometimes we tell people to sleep on their stomach, right? To cause a little bit more redistribution and help with the gas exchange. Um, so here again is another CT scan. This white dot here that you're seeing is really blood vessels that are enlarged more than normal. And this is the inflammation and damage caused by the COVID-19. If you use a dual energy CT scan, which is what they used in this case, you can see clearly what happens in the lungs. This dark patchy part here, there is no blood flow going there. This orange part, there is a lot of blood flow. You can correlate it with this. The area of abnormality corresponds to the area of reduced or completely absent blood flow in the lungs. Why is that so? You can also see this little part here, there is no blood flow. So the reason is if you look in the lung tissue, you can see a lot of blood clots within the lungs that is really blocking blood vessels. The tiny blood vessels that are supplying this area are not able to get blood flow to them so they can really release the carbon dioxide in them and get fresh oxygen in. So even though the patient is able to breathe normally, that's the way they will present, but they are not able to get oxygen into their blood because there are a lot of small blood clots within the blood vessels of their lung that prevents blood from getting to the correct site where it needs to get to really unload the carbon dioxide and pick up oxygen from the lung. So their blood oxygen is low, but they can breathe okay. So that sometimes if people have been listening to news or reading some medical journals, those are the people that are called the happy hypoxics. Hypoxic means their blood oxygen is low, but they are not feeling as though they cannot breathe properly. This is seen usually in the early phases of COVID-19 pneumonia.
Is this unique to COVID-19 or have you seen
This is unique to COVID? This is unique to COVID-19. This is unique to COVID-19. Unfortunately, you do see this, but to a much lesser extent in influenza pneumonia and other type of ARDS. So I would like your viewers to also see this blood vessel here. It's really damaged. It's significantly damaged because of the virus that has infected it. Now, the consequence...
And remind us, what's that big gap and space in what are these big white spaces?
That is the air sac. That is where it normally is that interact with the blood with the blood vessel there. Yes.
Okay.
And so ultimately, this is why we breathe. Essentially, you get air into this space, blood is flowing here, oxygen diffuses into the blood, carbon dioxide diffuses back into the air. You get fresh oxygen in your blood. It goes to your heart. The heart pumps fresh oxygen back to the rest of the body, and carbon dioxide will breathe out. So remember how I mentioned that there is destruction of blood vessels in the lung with COVID-19. The body tries to regenerate itself, tries to make new blood vessel. And but the problem is these new blood vessels are so new and fragile and so young that they can rupture easily. So sometimes, even though you do see blood clots in the lungs of patients with COVID, you also will see some bleeding. So balancing the two is very difficult. And Dr. Ajibade, based on the question you asked earlier, this is kind of like the amount or the density of new blood vessel that is formed in the lung of a patient in COVID compared to if somebody just had plain good old influenza. So you can see it's many folds more, which is something that prior to now we didn't used to see. So these new blood vessels that are formed are really very, very fragile and they can rupture. And it's not unusual to see a patient with COVID-19 cough up some blood. But of course, they are still forming blood clot. And we are in a situation where we need to decide, do we give them blood thinners so they're not going to form clot? Or do we just wait and hope that they stop bleeding? Which is one of the management challenges with this disease. So basically, that is essentially what you have with COVID-19 in terms of what it causes and how it affects the lung. And in summary, there are a lot of coronaviruses. We've had 3 that affect the human lung now in a very terrible way. The SARS-CoV-1, the MERS-CoV, now is the SARS-CoV-2 that causes COVID-19. And the way they kind of like, we have those viruses about every 10 years. There's still more where this comes from. So which is really why we need to be prepared, and we really need to be aware that there's possibility that unfortunately down the road we may have other respiratory viruses that can cause more global pandemics. But for now, what we have is what we have. And my best view, my best opinion and suggestion to your viewers is to follow the local guidelines of healthcare recommendation. Realize that, yes, fortunately, and we have been protected in sub-Saharan Africa, Nigeria specifically, for reasons that people still not completely understand. We have been very fortunate, but that does not mean this virus is not real. You still have to socially distance, you have to wear your mask, you have to follow recommendation of the local health authorities and the government recommendation. Remember, while you may not have this disease, while you may have a mild disease, you can spread it to people that are susceptible and are likely to develop severe disease and possibly even die from this disease. And if and when vaccination is available, please get vaccinated as soon as you are able to. That will also limit the spread of this.
You talked about it, Masif. That it cannot be overemphasized what you just said. And thank you for that masterful description of how COVID-19 affects the body. Yeah, I know it's still a mystery how we are still so spared in sub-Saharan Africa. Lots of theories, obviously, everything from vitamin D to our diet to our fact that we're a younger population and all sorts. But BCG is another, the BCG vaccine, you've heard that one too, right? So there's all sorts. Well, we're about to close now, but real quick, why is hypertension, if you can answer that briefly, why is hypertension such a high risk? I mean, I can understand lung disease. I can even understand diabetes. I can understand cardiac disease. Why hypertension being such a high risk?
That's a very good question. And it's mainly two reasons. So far that is known. I'm sure more will be figured out. Now, if you look at the prevalence of hypertension in any society, hypertension is commoner the older you are. The prevalence of hypertension becomes more and more common as people get older. So because you see hypertension in old people, and so both hypertension and old age are risk factor for this disease, or at least severe COVID-19, and they go together. It's difficult to tease out. Are we just seeing the fact that hypertension is more common in old people and hypertension is not much of a risk factor in and of by itself? There are still data coming out, but there's a lot of suspicion that is because hypertension is more common the older you are. Okay. The second thing is the receptor, that is where the virus binds to the surface of the cell to enter the cell. It binds to a receptor that's called the ACE2 receptor. This receptor is also an enzyme, and it helps reduce complication from hypertension. It's part of the pathway that mediates and controls human blood pressure and inflammation. So it's thought that there's a complex interaction between the virus really destroying that receptor as it goes into the cell, and it seems that there is less of that receptor. So in the absence of that receptor, which is also an enzyme to work the way it normally would, that predisposes hypertensives to having more severe disease. It's still very complex. It's not fully teased out, but that is just two of the theories that are out there now. But there's additional data coming. But certainly, hypertension is a risk factor for severe COVID. Right. That is what we know now.
Well, thank you for explaining that because now you've explained that the receptor is both a receptor and an enzyme.
And an enzyme, yes.
That's interesting. That's interesting.
So for everybody that is taking losartan, valsartan, captopril, lisinopril, and all of those is all in the same pathway that is affected by this virus. So you can see that's why initially there was an initial concern when this virus came along that, is anybody taking those medication? Are they at a higher risk of severe infection?
And those are ACE inhibitors.
Exactly. They are ACE inhibitors and ARBs, they are called. So there was an initial question, are they at necessarily a higher risk? But it turned out that they are not. And everybody should not stop their medication. They should continue taking their medication. And if they have any additional concern, they can talk to their doctor. But the medication should still work and probably may even be a little bit protective against severe COVID. But additional data are pending.
We are out of time, Doc. Thank you so much. I hope we can still pursue this further. I want to say please say a big hello to Fatih and the kids. And you will. Okay, good. And then we will be seeing you soon again. Thank you, folks, for joining us. We will see you again next week. God bless.